Hello, everyone. Hello and welcome. Welcome also Jaya Ratnam, Singapore's ambassador to the European Union. I'm Shada Islam at Friends of Europe. We are so many today here joining this conversation from across the world. So welcome to all of you as well. It's reassuring and uplifting, isn't it, that even in these difficult and very daunting times, when we are in lockdown or semi lockdown in all parts of the world practically, that we can, in these difficult times, come together thanks to technology and share our common challenges, talk about our shared interests and the challenges we face in this very unpredictable and uncertain world. And that's exactly what strategic conversations are about, an opportunity for all of us to come together in these difficult times, in these challenging times, and talk about our concerns today and tomorrow with strategic thinkers, policymakers, decision makers, and those who influence policy across the world, you and I, in many, many ways as well. So thank you once again for joining us. Now, you can join this conversation by sending messages and questions and comments to @Friends of Europe hashtag FOE debates. Jaya Ratnam, thank you again for joining us today. You have been ambassador of Singapore in the European Union for 3 years. You're in your 4th year now. And I have to say, not to flatter you or anything, but you are one of the most respected and active ambassadors here. It's on your watch as Singapore ambassador here that the EU-Singapore Free Trade Agreement was signed and then finally ratified. Quite an achievement that was. And of course, Singapore is a leading member of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN. Singapore at the moment is coordinator for the EU-ASEAN relationship as well. And of course, in recent days, months, we've been seeing how Singapore is in the limelight because of its very, I would say, successful way of tackling the COVID-19 emergency. So these are some of the questions that we'll be talking to you about, Jaya. But before I do that, I want to ask you something a bit more personal. So diplomacy, diplomats, ambassadors, it's all about socializing, isn't it? It's all about receptions, cocktail parties, lunches, and meeting face to face. That's how your power is wielded. So in these days of social distancing, how are you managing to do your job?
Uh, uh, good morning, everybody, and thank you for those kind words, Shada. We are in a really grave situation, but then we all need to adapt and adjust. Diplomats included. I think for the introverts among us, it's quite a comfortable setting. But then for the rest of us, we do need to find ways to carry on the business of engagement, which is the key part of diplomacy. Video conferences such as this, telephone conferences are the go-to mechanisms these days. The contacts carry on because international cooperation is the only way out of it. We're all in this together and we only can get out of it together. And so that's one. But for diplomats, including all my colleagues around, especially from ASEAN, the second part of our job is not just engaging our host governments, but also taking care of the Singaporeans, the local community here. So that has been another key part of our preoccupation for the past few weeks. So it's been a sufficiently busy period, a very surreal period, but a busy period.
Indeed, surreal, absolutely. So, Jai, I wanted to talk to you about Singapore and how it's dealing with COVID-19. And as I said, it's been cited in many, many papers and media outlets across the world that what Singapore is doing is actually something that others can emulate, can inspire, can be inspired by. And I was just wondering, in your words, what is Singapore doing that makes it so exceptional?
Well, I don't think we are particularly exceptional in that respect. I think we do not. It's quite clear we do not speak about success. No one is in a position to speak about success at this stage. We are in the middle of a battle, a war, and it's only intensifying. What we had for Singapore, like several other East Asian countries, including South Korea and even Hong Kong, was that we had the experience of SARS 17 years ago, which gave us a preview of what we could expect. We all learned from that and put in place the infrastructure, both in terms of resources and also protocols on how to deal with it. I do not think any of us anticipated the scale of what we are witnessing right now, but at least we had a basis, a clear foundation of how we wanted to move ahead on this. We acted early. In the in the middle of January, we introduced our measures. We acted strongly and decisively on, which actually gave us the policy space to take on more calibrated moves as the situation evolves. As you have rightly pointed out, is a deeply, deeply uncertain situation. We do not know where it's going, how far it will go, and how long it will take. And for that, we progressively ramp up our measures. Even today, we introduced new measures. But Singapore is not in a lockdown.
Right.
We try to keep to the extent possible a degree of normality. Schools still remain open, restaurants are open, but at the same time, we take on strict protocols of social distancing to ensure that that we break the transmission belt. But the two key things that that predicate our response is, firstly, on the medical response has been one of testing.
That's right.
So that we can catch as many people who have got the COVID-19, and more importantly, contact trace. In other words, break the transmission belt, quarantine those who have come in contact with them. Right. The numbers have remained so far manageable. By our standards, I think at last count yesterday, we had just over 800 odd people in Singapore affected by COVID-19, right, of which half are in hospital, about 19 are in serious critical care, and unfortunately, right, we have had 3 deaths over the past 2 months.
Right. Jaya, we were talking just earlier, and you said one of the things that's very important in a crisis of the kind we're living through is public communication, and that it's been very, very effective in Singapore. Can you just tell us what you've been doing in that sector that's been so effective?
Well, for us, and again, it is not just SARS, but one of the key takeaways from SARS and the way we had to deal with SARS was the importance of public communication, being upfront early to the general population in terms of what we are facing, what we don't know, what we know, and to do it regularly in a consistent manner. I think people need to know the truth. People will remain anxious. That is inevitable given the scale of what we are anxious.
Yes.
That is inevitable. But then what we need to do is give clear communication. And the purpose of communication is to build trust. Anxiety won't go away, but anxiety can be managed with trust. And for that, we have invested a great deal of time and effort at the political leadership down the line in terms of officials to get clear messaging out to the people and get them involved in seeing what they can do to address this COVID-19 situation. We have been quite clear. The Prime Minister recently spoke, I think, on Farid Zakaria or in another event, where he said that the tides are coming in. It's coming in from multiple directions, getting stronger.
Yeah.
All we have done, all of us around the world, is put up dikes, and these dikes leak. And what we need to do is plug those leaks, mop it up. But then that requires eternal vigilance, because if the leaks, if we do not manage leaks, leaks get stronger, becomes rivers, and rivers becomes torrents, and then we are in a really, really bad state.
Yeah, it's a strong metaphor. And you are now facing a crisis again, in a sense, because of the second wave, the so-called second wave of, I think, mainly Singaporeans going back to Singapore. How are you dealing with that?
Well, we absolutely, the numbers have again slowly begun to pick up, partly because we have been encouraging Singaporeans, especially our students abroad, to return, and so a number of them have come back with COVID-19, and also there have been some local transmission in Singapore. This is inevitable. We have no expectation that numbers will taper off, at least in the immediate week or so, and so we expect it to carry on in this way. What is key is really getting the right measures in place so that we can mop it up as soon as it happens.
Right. And so another question for you, Jaya, thank you for being so patient with us. It's basically, you know, we talk a lot about exchanging experiences, sharing experiences, best practices. international cooperation. Is that really happening, or is it really each country, each nation for itself?
I think the reality is that the manner in which we all experience COVID-19 required triage. All of us took measures quickly and urgently, and necessarily so, hard measures that we had to take. So we had to look to ourselves first. But for us to get out of it, we all need to work together. Because at the end of the day, all our dikes can be strong, but then we are only as strong as our weakest link. And even if we look at China, which has done made a really superlative effort in terms of controlling COVID-19, right now their concern is the incoming infections coming in from outside. So no country will be immune until we get the entire system working again. And that comes back down to international cooperation. International cooperation, we got the WHO, in which we should get behind them and push and support their efforts. But more importantly, to look to ourselves and what we can do at other levels. As you may know, we are at the regional level. ASEAN and the EU had a ministerial level press video conference about a few weeks ago.
Right. Tell us about that.
Well, it was you had all the ASEAN member states participating in it. And on the European side was led by HRVP, Mr. Borrell. And it was a good sharing session as to where we stand, where we saw it going, what works, what does not work. And it's important, again, it comes back to building up of trust among each other also, in terms of where we stand and where we think we can go and how we can work together. And this also comes down actually at the critical level with the health officials. So we have sufficient channels with ECDC, the European Center for Disease Control, to again share information and share best practices. And this lays the basis for us to move forward in the coming weeks, in the coming months, as we seek to find a way out of this.
Yeah, and I would imagine that when you have the Asia-Europe meeting in Cambodia later this year, this will be the health partnership will be one of the issues that comes up. I was just wondering about one comment that I think your foreign minister made that was really, I thought, very, very important to highlight at this moment. He said recently, when the situation, and I'm reading it, when the situation stabilizes, it is critical that we work together to boost our economies. And this means remaining open in terms of trade and investments to the rest of the world. But it's nice to say that, but you can see around us economic nationalism, protectionism, barriers being set up. So how are we going to manage this post-COVID-19 world?
I think it's inevitable that all of us will take a hard-headed approach in terms of, and a really pragmatic approach in terms of globalization. We would look for a greater sense of security in terms of movement of people, movement of goods, movement of services as the key lessons learned. But I think the key lesson from COVID-19 is it's not an indictment on globalization, but rather proof of its pervasiveness and how we need to work together to better manage it. And we can better manage it at a variety of levels, in which we really need to step up. Like I said, like I mentioned, the first one is cooperation, because we're only as strong as our weakest link.
Right.
And we really need to step up the immediate cooperation. The second one is research, because the only way we get out of this is a vaccine and better treatments. And we need to put combine our resources to work to find a solution on it. And the third one is, as you referenced, my minister, is to work together, because we are in a perfect storm in terms of grief. We are being affected at every level, especially the economic level. Life and livelihoods are at stake today in every country, and we are taking unprecedented steps all around the world to support our economies. Effectively, all our economies are in a state of semi-suspended animation.
That's right. Hibernation.
How do we get it working, not just beyond the crisis or when the crisis moves towards a recovery phase, and it will, but to get us to that stage, what is key is actually at two levels. Firstly, supply chains. Global supply chains need to be activated and kept active. And right now you see air
Breakdown.
transport being severely impaired,
Absolutely.
border restrictions, you can see that in the EU, let alone across the world, in terms of land borders and also sea transport. So at every level, supply chains are being affected. Yesterday, the G20 trade ministers issued a strong statement in terms of how we can work together to ensure that essential supplies, particularly medical supplies, which are part of the global supply chain, move around and get produced. The other aspect is all the restrictions that we put in place right now, for us to gradually move towards reducing it in a calibrated way, in a way that we have confidence, requires all of us to work together, perhaps to come up with some guidelines in terms of how we move in sync. We did not react to the crisis in sync, but we only can get out of the crisis by working in sync.
Absolutely, Jaya. Let me just give you a few questions and comments. We don't have much time, but let me just give you a question from Carlo Martuscelli. He's saying, what role has the widespread use of surgical masks played in the low rates of infection in Singapore? There's one question about what Singapore is taking to support its economic recovery at the local level. And another question is, did the various Singapore services, security, police, military, was there coordination of their actions in fighting this pandemic? So 3 questions for you.
Firstly, in terms of mask, we took a decision early on following the WHO that masks were for those who were affected by COVID-19. It was not meant for the general population. There's a practical issue of supply. There's not enough masks in the world to give us all that kind of level of protection. There's also a question of need. There's a question of need. Every Singaporean has been given 4 masks. That would ensure that you can get to a doctor. And if you do have COVID-19, it will take care of you from then on. But you do not need to wear a mask on a daily basis. So in terms of masks, we have been quite clear. In terms of our public messaging, all our leaders walk around without masks, and we seem to be doing okay. In terms of the economic effect, yes, it's profound. We are a hyper-connected country. We're the second largest transshipment port in the world. We are a major hub for aviation travel. We are in the middle of a multiple set of crossroads. We have the world's largest land crossing. 300,000 people cross our borders between Singapore and Malaysia every day. 4 of the 10 largest, 10 most frequented air lanes are in ASEAN, and 3 of it are with Singapore. So the amount of traffic and all of that has come to a stop. Absolutely. And of course, that would have profound effects on the economy. Our regular budget was issued a month ago. It's our normal budget, in which there was strong support, already a strong stimulus package to address it. The expectation was that would tide us over for a few months until, and they expected that there was a need for a second package. But given the rapidity of the spread of COVID-19 and the impact it has had, we issued a second stimulus budget, which is about $48 billion, about 12% of our GDP. So a lot of financial heavy lifting going on there. Absolutely, and the key part of the budget is actually on keeping people employed, protecting jobs. That has been a key aspect of the budget support. The finance minister and the prime minister has made it clear that we will watch it closely, and if need to, we would intervene again. Like everybody else, we all need to do everything it takes to get us out of this, and we will do so. The final question was on the role of the coordination of the different security forces working together to tackle this epidemic as well. It's not a security issue insofar. I mean, we have thrown in some legislation or some fines and other enforcement mechanisms to send for public signaling in terms of social distancing to ensure compliance. But apart from that, I think social pressure, societal pressure is actually the key aspect in terms of ensuring compliance with this necessary social distancing and social responsibility, because no country has enough people to monitor each other. We all need to be each other's keepers.
Absolutely. Jaya, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your insights, and also talking to us about the future, because I think that's very important as well. We're in a tunnel at the moment, but there will be light at the end of the tunnel. And as you say, that's when we will really have to come together. We didn't do it when we were hit by this pandemic, but now we know what we have to do to get our economies, our people, our lives back to perhaps not the way it was, perhaps to a better future. So Jaya, thank you very much indeed for joining us for our first security strategic conversation. The next strategic conversation is on the 22nd of April. The time will be given to you later, provided to you later. It will be with Gunnar Wiegand, who is the Managing Director for Asia Pacific at the European External Action Service. So finally, thank you to all of you for joining us. Thank you again, Jaya, and see you very soon. Stay online. Friends of Europe is doing many, many interesting things, even during this very sad and troubled times in lockdown. We're still online, we're still publishing, we're still doing our conversations. So stay with us, and thank you once again very, very much. Bye.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.